Consider this. It is a Friday morning in April 2026, and somewhere in Islamabad, Pakistani intermediaries are on the phone with Iranian officials, threading a needle through one of the most delicate diplomatic corridors in decades. Both sides are moving, slowly, carefully, the way you have to when nearly 50 years of blood and sanctions and assassinated generals sit between you and a deal. And then a phone buzzes, not in Islamabad, in Washington, and everything stops. Here's the detail that doesn't add up. As the weekend approached, the United States and Iran appeared to be closing in on a deal to end a 7-week war. Then the President of the United States did exactly what his own staffers had repeatedly said he would not do. He got on social media. He picked up the phone with reporters, and he started announcing the terms of a deal that, by every credible account, had not yet been agreed to. Think about that for a moment. Not a leak, not an unnamed source. The president himself, in real time, narrating a negotiation that his own people were still conducting and declaring a winner before anyone had signed anything. The detail that doesn't add up is this: why would a president, any president, undercut his own diplomats mid-conversation? The answer to that question is worth following all the way down. To understand what happened, you have to understand the architecture of this war and what it cost to even get the two sides talking. Iran pulled out and suspended nuclear talks indefinitely after a prior round of military strikes. Talks only resumed in early 2026 after large-scale protests inside Iran. Even then, the ground was treacherous. Nearly 50 years of bitter conflict have included terror attacks on Americans and the downing of an Iranian civilian airliner by a U.S. warship. Trump himself assassinated Iran's top military commander during his first term and oversaw strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. So when back-channel talks began threading through, Oman and Pakistan, through quiet rooms with Omani and Pakistani foreign ministers carrying messages neither side would say out loud, that was not routine diplomacy. That was a small miracle of patience. And it was fragile in the way only rare things are fragile. The key players on the Iranian side were Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. American officials also suspected a divide between Iran's negotiating team and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, raising serious questions about who could ultimately sign off on any deal. That internal fracture was known, it was being navigated, and the one thing Iranian negotiators needed above everything else was the ability to go home and tell hardliners that they had not been humiliated at the table. Now, follow the paper trail. Trump claimed Iran had agreed to a host of provisions that sources familiar with the talks said had not yet been finalized. He asserted that Tehran had agreed to many of the most contentious U.S. demands, including handing over enriched uranium, and declared an imminent end to the war. Iranian officials rejected those assertions publicly and denied they were preparing for another round of talks. Within hours, the rising optimism collapsed. One person familiar with the talks told CNN, "The Iranians didn't appreciate POTUS negotiating through social media and making it appear as if they had signed off on issues they hadn't yet agreed to, and ones that aren't popular with their people back home." The Iranians, this person added, were particularly concerned about appearing to look weak. Notice what that means. Iran's negotiators weren't just offended. They were politically trapped. It placed Iranian negotiators in a difficult position domestically, as appearing to concede too much under pressure could weaken their standing within Iran's internal power structure. If Trump says publicly that Iran folded and Iran hasn't folded, Iran's negotiators cannot then walk into a room and fold, not without a domestic political cost they cannot afford. And it wasn't just once. Since the start of the Iran war, Trump has issued a barrage of social media statements that critics say have undermined diplomacy. A commodities executive at Citadel told the FT Commodities Global Summit that the roughly 300% surge in oil and gas volatility during the conflict's opening weeks was driven in part by the president's Truth Social posts, and said he now keeps a screen dedicated solely to monitoring the president's social media feed. The market is treating a presidential Twitter account as a primary intelligence source. That is not a communications quirk. That is a structural problem. Trump officials themselves, anonymously, told CNN and the Wall Street Journal that the president's conduct was hampering efforts to make a deal. his own team, not the opposition, not foreign governments, his own people speaking in the shadows, watching their work get dismantled. In public, post by post, here's where it all clicks into place and it arrives quietly. Ronald Reagan never warmed up for summits with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev by blitzing television networks hailing agreements before they had even met. Presidents don't do that. They don't do that because every experienced diplomat in the room knows that the other side has a domestic audience too, that the Iranian foreign minister answering to Tehran's hardliners needs as much political cover as the American Secretary of State answering to Congress. Secrecy in negotiations is not weakness. It is the mechanism by which agreements become possible at all. Trump knows this. In The Art of the Deal, a man who unapologetically seeks always to be at the center of the action admits that what drives him is more the quest for a deal than what is actually in it. That sentence contains more explanatory power than 100 think tank reports. The deal as performance, the announcement as the event, the negotiation as content. And here's the part that should concern all of us. Barbara Slavin, a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center, noted that Trump was willing to send Vice President J.D. Vance to negotiate in Pakistan, but Tehran did not appear ready to show up at the talks. This war hasn't gone the way he expected from the very beginning, she said, and Iran has discovered new leverage in its control of the Strait of Hormuz. That leverage is real. The strait remains closed, trapping 20% of the world's oil supply in the Persian Gulf. Gas prices have already topped $4 a gallon nationally. Every day of stalled talks is a day of economic pressure on ordinary Americans' pressure that has nothing to do with ideology and everything to do with the cost of getting to work. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the cards are in the president's hands right now and Iran is in a very weak position. That may be true on paper, but a country that controls a choke point for a fifth of the world's oil supply, that refuses to negotiate under threat, and that has successfully used a president's own impulsiveness as a delay tactic that country has leverage it, did not have 2 months ago. Strength on a battlefield does not automatically convert into leverage at a table. And right now, the table is empty. 2 threads remain open, and they matter. The first, American officials suspect there is a genuine divide between Iran's formal negotiating team and the Revolutionary Guard. Who exactly has the authority to make this deal final, and does that person even want a deal? The second, some analysts warn that Iran could be drawing out discussions as a play for time, as it unearths missile systems buried over the course of the war. If that is true, every stalled round of talks is not a setback, it is an objective. The war may be 7 weeks old. The miscalculation may be much older than that. The question is not whether a deal is possible. The question is whether the man trying to make it can stop announcing its terms long enough to actually finish it.